Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Your Overseas Home webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to make your money work smarter when moving to Greece. My name is Julian Benson. I'm a writer here at Your Overseas Home, and I'm joined by Jacob Shelton from Holborn Assets. He's a specialist in citizenship by investment, and Holborn Assets is a leading financial services company that has helped more than 20,000 clients over its 25-year history. Jacob, hello. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your day-to-day?
Yeah, hi Julian. Thanks for having me, and thank you for Your Overseas Home for having me. If you have watched a few of these webinars, you might have seen my face before. And not only Julian, am I a citizenship by investment specialist, but also I am a financial advisor that focuses on expats moving abroad, specifically U.S. expats. Although my team does work with expats all over the world, living all over the world, and that's really what Holborn focus on in general. We have 18 international offices, manage a little over 4 billion of assets under management, really all for expats, and particularly here in the EU, which we have seen such a migration, let's call it, of people both from the UK and the US here. Even since the start of the year, it's been crazy. I've been in financial services for 10 years, mostly back in the States at companies like JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. Currently live here in Valencia, Spain. Just made the move from Marbella here a few weeks ago. Live here with my wife and little puppy golden retriever. And help people, as they're planning on making the move. Maybe they're already here and we need to look at the wealth management piece. Greece has a excellent residency by investment program that we'll chat about here in just a second, and excited to show it off.
That's great. Thanks so much. Well, as Jacob's been setting up, one of the things which we're going to be talking about today is obviously wealth and money management. And it's very easy when we're talking about sort of moving abroad that we focus on the literal move of sort of buying a house, moving property, and these sorts of things. And it's important that you do take time ahead of a move to actually think about what you're going to be doing with your money. What's the best way to make sure that it I don't want to say survives the trip, but in terms of that you're taking it out of the schemes you have at home, putting it into the right schemes in the new country. So as Jacob was setting up, we're going to begin with a presentation from him, which is going to be teeing up what you might want to ask some questions about at the end. But really, that is the focus of today. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to put your questions to a financial advisor who works with these issues every day. So do use that question panel on the right side of the screen to put in your questions. And then at the end of Jacob's presentation, I'll put those questions to him. And so it's your opportunity to hear answers to your specific needs. I would also say, though, if you've got a very specific situation that it is unique to you, it might be a case of you've got some granular details about your financial setup. We won't necessarily get into the weeds of that on this presentation, but it's a great way to sort of raise the problem and then book a call with Jacob at the other end. A last housekeeping matter from me. If you need a reminder of anything that gets discussed today or want to share this webinar with your family and friends afterwards, we will be sending a recording of this to you in the by email, and also we'll be hosting it on our website. So yeah, if you miss anything today or you need to drop out and pick this up at another time, there's a recording available, so you're not going to miss anything at all. So without any further ado, over to you, Jacob.
Perfect. And Julian, I will also have, during the question and answers little piece of the presentation, also have a QR code up so that you're able to book just directly into my diary. I will say I am headed back to the States on Monday, and so I will be a little bit limited availability my early morning there, afternoon here in Central European time. But yeah, today is all about moving to Greece, right? And kind of already gave a little introduction about myself and what I do and where I'm at. So really today, we're going to cover initially the residency by investment, just give a few details about those options. We'll look at some tax considerations, right? Obviously extremely important when you're planning a move. And then we'll look at just a brief banking in Greece and financial services in general when you're looking at wealth management. And I find that most expats, right, are looking to retire in the EU, and so really what that means can be extremely important for yourself. And I will say I do give quite a few webinars. This is actually my first time running through this presentation that I built, so please excuse me if there's a few bumps in the road. But there's really going to be three distinct options when you're looking at this residency by investment program. With Greece, it's one of the lowest residency by investment programs within the EU, starting at 250,000 for the purchase of a property. There's a few stipulations with that at that 250,000 level. It does have to be a commercial property that we're going to convert over to a residential property. And so working with Your Overseas Home as well, they can certainly help identify some of these properties that will work for this. Holborn's able to help with that actual visa process. Or to make it a little bit more simple, and I will say for those who aren't used to doing remodels and conversions like that, particularly in a new country, at 400,000 with a property of at least 120 square meters, think, just off the top of my head, probably 2,400 square feet, give or take. Don't quote me on that. I've lived in square feet most of my life, not square meters. And so, but that minimum is going to be 400,000. And the residency by investment program, right? If you are a resident for those 7 years, you do actually have the ability to apply for a Greek passport as well. There's a really great process that Greece has for that. But in the meantime, you don't actually have to be a resident of Greece, right? It's a really, really flexible program. You still have Schengen days outside of Greece of that 90 out of 180 days, but within Greece, you're unlimited and you can come and go really as you please. There's also an investment fund option that are really particular mutual funds and some different alternatives or private equity funds that are focused on the Greek economy and growing that, which obviously is beneficial for Greece. But we also get a return that's built off of those funds, right? Going to be better for someone who's a little bit more passive, maybe who wants to explore around Greece, not necessarily go back to the same property every single time. The minimum amount for that is going to be 400,000. Also, as I'm talking about these options, it does include your children under 21, any type of financially dependent adult parents, as well as spouse, and it can also be, parents-in-law and things along that nature. And then there's also, a fairly simple solution of a fixed deposit, or Americans think CDs, certificate of deposits. It has to be at least a year term. And once you do pull that, right, you essentially forfeit your Golden Visa residency, but it does allow you to really go in for a few years if you desired. So that there's certainly some great options around that. Like I mentioned, right, there's not really any requirements around this. We hear about the Portuguese Golden Visa all the time, and we certainly help with a lot of Portuguese Golden Visas. But with Greece, it's going to be a fairly similar idea. There's no other requirements. You make the investment, you get the visa. And as I mentioned, right, there's definitely, you get to bring your family with you, which is a great benefit. It only takes one of those investments at those minimum levels to bring your whole family as well. And so particularly if you're already planning on buying a property in Greece that's going to meet some of those requirements, it makes sense to me to do that. Now, one thing I will mention, because we talked about the 400,000 minimum, if you are buying in Greece or one of the larger islands, particularly Santorini, the minimum, if you're buying in Athens or Santorini, the minimum is going to be 800,000 euros. And so particularly as we look at Santorini, right, good luck buying a property that's size under 800,000 euros anyways at this point in time, or finding a property there that's even close to that at that size. I'm sure Julian has probably seen some fairly expensive properties be under there at this point. It's gotten fairly expensive. Personally, I love a lot of the Greek islands, though. Even I'm looking at Aegina, which is fairly close to Athens, but you're really in a much more quiet area. It's one of my favorite islands. Tax considerations, right? If you're going to be moving there, it's pretty important. So when are you actually a tax resident of Greece? And it's similar to a lot of other EU countries, 183 days, right? That's at least half the year. If you're there over 183 days, then you are a tax resident. Greece taxes worldwide income at the same tax rates that you're really getting within any type of Greece source income, Greek source income, excuse me. Now, if you aren't there 183 days, you still have to pay Greece your Greek sourced income as well along those same progressive tax rates, which we'll get to in just a second. Now, Greece, much like France, is really particular in this, right? If it's determined that your vital source of living, right, and that's a bad translation, but you can really understand what it means, or if you know your job's in Greece, you spend a lot of time there, right, and it can really be construed by the Greek government that that's where your primary home is, then they can still treat you as a tax resident, even if you're not there 183 days. And so I always say, you know, if you're gonna have any sort of Greek source income or have a property there, we probably don't want to be there 181, 182 days, right? No need to cut it close, because at that point they might come after you, potentially even the year after. Now we talked a little bit about the progressive tax rates, right? They're actually, let's just jump into it because it's really easy to remember the different income tax rates for really what we're looking at in Greece, right? And these are all in euros, and so it's 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000 above 40. Those are kind of the different hurdles you hit for the different tax rates that you really get to. And so for anything that you're really making above 40,000, right, we can really see what that's actually going to look like for your total tax amounts. Rental income tax is going to be slightly different. So I did include that rate below. I do find that a lot of people using that residency by investment option are looking at renting the property out for at least a part of the year. Particularly when it comes to this time of year, right, you're able to get much more value on short-term rentals. And maybe you want to be there. I'm personally from Portland, Oregon. It rains 9 months out of the year. Being in Greece in October, I live on the beach in Valencia, so not so much relevant anymore. But when I was originally living back in Portland, it'd be raining in October. Could have gone over to Greece, got some beautiful weather, got some time in the sun, and that property pretty much would have paid for itself from June through August during the heavy tourist season. And so I do see quite a few people doing that. Greece is one of the few property markets in the EU, in my opinion, that the beach areas are completely saturated. I did talk about Santorini, so that might be a little saturated at this point. Still some opportunities in play, but there's so much of Greece and so much coastline in Greece that you can really get some great spots that don't break the bank in comparison to, you mentioned I just moved from Marbella. The properties down there are extremely expensive. And you really start to look at value for the dollar, particularly as the dollar is not doing so hot. And you really want to judge what's going to work best for you. So banking and financial services, right? This is really for expats where a lot of the concern comes from. I mean, this is the most questions I will say, the residency by investment, it's a fairly straightforward process at the end of the day. You do this, you get this is your outcome. The banking side, fairly straightforward in Greece as well, particularly when it comes to other countries in the EU. Opening up a French bank account can be a huge headache. Opening up a Spanish bank account, huge headache. In Greece, it's a little bit more relaxed. Institutions are a little bit more friendly to expats and don't necessarily need a Greek address for most financial institutions there. And now we're just talking about, daily banking, adding funds in euros, right? Nothing, no type of investments. This is just the straightforward. Now you might need to have some source of funds documents, right? Maybe a tax return from the previous year, some pay stubs showing where your funds are coming from. And I know this is something that many Americans are a little shocked at, because we don't necessarily need that, right? We just are, as long as we have an ID, we can open up a bank account. Not so much the case for different EU institutions. They really want to make sure that you're not coming in and trying to launder money there. At the end of the day, it's all anti-money laundering laws, and so they have to be extremely cautious. You'll also need your passport. If you do have a proof of address in Greece, utility bill, even a deed to a property, right? Sure, that can make it easier, but it's not necessary in most institutions. Again, when I give a France webinar, it's a whole different story. When it comes to investing, while you are an expat in Greece, you're a tax resident there, living there, it can be a little bit more difficult than just opening up the bank account. Now, US investors, right, for the vast majority of our funds, you want to make sure to leave those within the United States. Any type of retirement funds, this specifically includes. There's a lot of institutions out there that say they can take your IRA, 401k, hold them offshore. And there's very specific structures that you need in order to do that, including a self-directed IRA LLC, which is possible. It's also possible to use that type of structure. If you're a US investor interested in the residency by investment, you can use that type of structure to actually qualify for the residency by investment. And so that's something that we help with and assist with, that most other people in my experience don't necessarily have that experience, and frankly don't know what I'm talking about when I start talking about some of these structures. Now that's not right for everyone. So if you have questions about it, again, please book in with me for a later date. UK investors, right? You might have been working with an advisor on your pension, right? Maybe you have a SIP. Maybe you've been an expat in the past and you have QRUPs floating around out there, which not the best structure anymore, by the way, since last September. And so we really want to make sure that your accounts essentially don't get forgotten about, or that your advisor says, hey, you don't have a UK address anymore, you're living in Greece, I can't help you. And then what do you do, right? And that's where, as you can tell from my accent, right, I'm not the UK specialist on my team. However, we do have some UK pension specialists that can certainly assist you, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction there. We handle, my team in Spain alone, I think we have over 500 clients with UK pensions that we manage from abroad, and so that certainly can be a huge part of the retirement plan, and making sure that continues to grow even as you're living outside of the UK. Now, I will say, Greece is probably not the place where you want to put the majority of your investment funds. We have already seen, right, financial institutions lack the structure and security, as many major markets, the United States, the UK being good examples, but also different offshore jurisdictions that are extremely secure, well regulated. Even as we look at Jersey is a great example. Isle of Man, Channel Islands, Dublin, right? These are great examples of jurisdictions that have a regulatory body that's overseeing these institutions, whereas Greece structure isn't quite as built up and developed, and we wanted to make sure that your investments stay safe. Now, this is a part of your overseas home, and I talk about this on every single one of my webinars, particularly right now because currencies are all over the place, but you want to partner with a good currency exchange service. Now, we use Smart Currency Exchange, which is a partner of your overseas home. Always happy to make an introduction to one of the account managers there. They are excellent. And one thing, particularly as we're talking about residency by investment, that smart currency exchange does really well that a lot of other exchange houses don't do is forward contracts. So if you're thinking you're going to be buying a property, right? All your funds are in USD, and you're buying a property in Greece for 500,000 euros, right? You want to make sure that the exchange rate doesn't deteriorate further than it has in the past 6 months. The US dollar is down 15% to the euro over the last 6 months. Real estate transactions in Greece don't happen overnight or even in the 30-day window that they happen in the United States. We're looking at 2, maybe 3 months, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Julianne. But it's really a different process, and it just takes a little bit longer. And so we want to make sure that during that period of time, you know exactly how many dollars that you're going to be spending on this house, and that it's not going to fluctuate either direction. We don't want to make it, you know, your property purchase a gamble on black, right? We want to make sure that it's a locked in exchange rate, and you know exactly how much that you need and that you're going to be spending. And again, Smart Currency Exchange does a great job of explaining the best process for this. Outside of actual property purchases, right? One other thing that, in my mind, Smart Currency Exchange does best is really planning around consistent income. And so if you're on a fixed income, whether that be pension, Social Security, getting income from an annuity, which also US people watching, happy to help get any of those set up or consult on the best way to take those. But Smart Currency Exchange can really make the best currency plan for these fixed amounts that you're going to get in another currency than what you're currently living in. And so creating this type of currency plan can be extremely important for your long-term success living in another currency than where your income's coming from. And so I know we talked about a lot today, covering some pretty separate topics between residency and by investment, taxation, and financial services. I do already see that we have some questions in the bank. So, you know, definitely happy to help start answering those. Don't be shy. Please ask as many as you can. And if we aren't able to get to your question, again, please feel free to book an appointment. It's no obligation consultation. So, you know, always happy to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. See if maybe there's some way we can help.
Fantastic, Jacob. Thank you so much for that. As you say, you covered a huge amount of ground. I was writing questions through when I've got lots, but I will dive in with some of the viewers' questions because I don't want to keep them waiting. So the first one actually is talking about flat rate tax and how that would apply to overseas income if you'd become a resident of Greece. So, I mean, I'm assuming something like an example of this might be your pension income. You've built it up in the UK, you're paying it over to Greece. How does the tax apply to that sort of an income?
So I think what David is talking about there, right, is Greece actually has some specific provisions on some flat rate taxes for pensioners specifically, that can actually result in a lower tax rate. David, to answer you directly there, right, I'm not a tax advisor, and so in order to actually qualify for that and to make sure that you qualify for that, I would actually talk to a Greece local tax advisor because they're the ones who are going to be able to walk you through that specific process. I found, right, that it's not as easy as it's advertised a lot of times to actually make sure that you get that rate on your taxes. Because Julian, as far as some of those, you know, flat rate coming in from your pension in the UK, at that point, because you are a Greek tax resident, you actually want to separate from HMRC, and because you're going to just be paying taxes in Greece. And so Greece has some of those provisions, depending on your locality as well. And so it does get just a little bit more specific than maybe it gets led on sometimes.
Sounds good. And so actually, David, what I'd say to that is we do work with lots of partners in Greece. We may have a tax specialist that we might be able to put you in touch with. So actually, and as you can see, the other question we have is about using that limited liability company setup that you were talking about, Jacob. And so, yeah, US residents can use LLCs for purchasing real estate in Greece, and those residency rules will apply to the LLC owners, same as it would be if you were a private citizen.
That's correct. Now, typically, right, the structure has to be under your name specifically, or even, dual members with a family member that would also be on the golden visa there. Typically, the best use case for that, though, is actual self-directed IRA LLCs. And so that you're actually able to continue to use IRA funds, keep that under the retirement account structure for the actual investment in Greece. And so, so to answer your question there, Jen, it's yes and yes, but the prevalency and the actual taxation is way more favorable if you're keeping it under that retirement account structure.
Awesome. And so I suppose actually in this case, it is going to be a matter of, Jim, book a call, have a conversation, work out whether the situation you're in currently is one which would apply well for this, because it is, whether it will fit for you is going to be a matter of having a conversation, a bit of back and forth, just to work out if it's the right scheme for you. Jacob, I suppose like it's a very general question, but it is just a good to know for people who are watching. When should someone get in contact with you? What documents should they have ready? What almost is the perfect customer for you when someone gets in touch?
Really, in my mind, right, as soon as you know your time frame, really no matter what that time frame is, as long as it's within, let's call it the next 3 years, and the country. That's really, people have contacted me in the past to, what countries for this, what countries for this, and a lot of it's going to be personal preference at the end of the day. Yeah, there's maybe some taxation considerations, but happy to have a conversation at minimum at any point along the journey. Now, ideally, right, we're looking to move 3 to 6 months. We're getting things set up. We're making decisions. Maybe you already know which type of visa you want, who you're using for a visa. And your old financial advisor has already told you that, hey, now that you're moving abroad, can I work with you? And so we really need to make a decision with your assets, and what are we doing next? And so, but again, happy to have conversations with anyone along any stage of the journey.
Awesome. And actually, so one of the things you talked about is a lot of the conversations you're having with people at the moment is that they are planning on retiring in Greece. They are moving from the US, the UK, and they're building a new life over in Greece. How much does your advice differ when someone is planning on returning in the future? So, for instance, they're in the UK, they're retiring over to Greece, but they think in 10 years' time they may well want to move back. Would you give different advice?
Yes, very different advice, because the cost of living, right? Cost of living in Greece is going to be much, much lower than moving back to US or the UK. And so that's really part of the retirement plan, right? We're looking at in the future that cost of living is going to be fairly low. Now, if we look at, hey, if there's any type of health issues, we're moving back to the US, all of a sudden those healthcare bills start getting, fairly substantial. And so we need to make sure that we're building more into the financial plan, particularly towards end of life. And so there's, as far as the financial structures, maybe not a huge difference, particularly if we're thinking 10 years. If it's 2 years, certainly. I mean, there's going to be, we're going to want to leave most of what we have already in place, maybe just at institutions that can handle, a foreign address. But if we're really in it for the long haul, which I'm seeing most people are, then we're really going to want to make sure we have long-term solutions that are going to work for you.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, so I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up on time, but as I would say and have been saying, that the best thing you can do at this point is a book called Jacob. You can talk through your personal situation. You can talk through the options as well. 'Cause if there's one thing that's clear from his presentation, what he's been saying today, is that there are a lot of options available to people who are looking to move to Greece. Be it sort of how they use their money to set up apply for that golden visa, be it through uh, commercial properties or mutual funds or through simply having that bank deposit. So book a call, have a conversation, work out what's going to be the best route in for you. And Jacob, I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for talking us through all of this today.
Well, thanks for having me, Julian. And again, yeah, happy to help out with anyone if you need it.
That's great. If you've enjoyed today, please do leave a review on Trustpilot. It's extremely helpful to us to get your feedback, but also it does mean that other people get to find our webinars and find our services. But until the next webinar, I just want to say thank you again for tuning in, for all your questions, and I hope that your journey to Greece is smooth and easy. All right, well, thank you so much, and see you all soon.